when I was 14, I ended up having a major meltdown at school. And I could feel myself like this pain of all of the emotions that I'd been feeling. I think I had buried so deep, but something triggered me with some mean slur that I was called in the boys' locker room or something. And it was just that final straw that sent me over the edge. And I busted through the counselor's door. And as soon as I shut the door, I just started bawling. I mean, just sobbing. And I could not get the words out. And she just sat there and was consoling me. And finally, I got the words out. I don't want to live anymore.
Jason, how you doing, man?
Dude, I'm pumped.
I am too.
I'm really pumped about finally getting this kind of to the finish line and getting it out there. And you know, it's weird. I'm normally not nervous in front of cameras and things, but because this is a deeply personal project, you know, I've kind of had some pre-jitters before we started rolling here. But definitely excited to talk about it today.
Me too. So let's tell the people what it is we're talking about, because I'm sure people tuning in is like, what is? I have no idea what this is. And maybe they clicked on the Keep Going post or saw this on Facebook or something. But yeah, this is the first episode of the Keep Going podcast. We're still going to be figuring out what exactly the Keep Going podcast looks like. But for this first episode, I'm going to talk to you about what this is all about, which is the Keep Going book, which we have a copy of right here. The Keep Going book, brand new. Is it even out yet, technically?
Technically, well, by the time
we're done, yes.
By the time that this airs, I'm sure it'll be available for purchase. It's kind of a little. It started out as kind of a memoir, if you will, just of my story of going through some difficult times in life and struggling with things. You know, back in my younger youth days, we really didn't talk about it a whole lot, and we still struggle to talk about it. And, you know,
and what is it?
Anxiety, depression, just, you know,
the mental health
stuff. And, you know, and I think I'm now in my mid 40s, pushing upper mid 40s. And, you know, so in the 90s, as I was growing up, or even 80s, you know, big emphasis on physical health, you know, PE, we all had PE, but we really never had those classes or learned at home or at school about, you know, what to do when you feel stuck in a rut, a really low place where your mind overtakes you and starts telling you some really negative things that ultimately can turn into anxiety or, as we widely know now, as severe depression. And I've had many bouts of that through my life, and always had something in me that pushed me to keep going. But then fast forward how the book kind of came, you know, I started writing it really in about 2016, 2017. But then as the pandemic hit, you know, it kind of messed with all of us, right? I mean, we all were
it was definitely something that kind of completely unprecedented.
Correct. And you know, and now looking back, we know some of the effects that COVID had on today's youth and college kids. And you know, it just was a very weird time. We're not, I don't think as a human race, we're not supposed to be isolated like that for so long.
It is tough. Yeah.
We long for community and connection. And I think that was a major thing. But, you know, I've always struggled, and most people that know me in business or whatever wouldn't guess it, but I've always struggled with insecurity, not believing enough in myself. And, we're always going to be our biggest critic, right? You know, from the time that we develop the ability for cynicism, you know, which a lot of times is in our teenage years when we're picking ourselves apart, or, you know, maybe we're being bullied by the cool kids or whatever. Whatever. Everybody's got their own unique story on how their, I'll call it their self-worth narrative is really shaped throughout our life. And you know, even as an adult, I still get in my head. And so you know, as I wrote this book, I had all those voices saying, this is no good, this is not, you know, it's not finished, it's not perfect, you know, we live in this comparison world of just, it's got to be absolutely perfect. And you as a fellow creator, you know, there's really no such thing. And so we've got to get out of our head and just, and if it can touch and reach somebody, to feel like somebody gets it. Because I think that's the scary thing about mental health struggles, especially us men. but certainly women as well. We don't talk about it, and because I think for far too long it's a way people say that, you're being weak,
Yes.
when you're being
It's
vulnerable.
tough to show that kind of vulnerability. Yeah.
Correct. And so I for one, and I had a really good friend of mine that said, look, I mean, he called me to the mat and he's like, you're an idiot if you do not release this book, because get out of your head, because if you can, impact just one person, it's well worth it. And I think so that's really been my motivation. And my second why behind the book is really my daughter.
Yeah.
She came to me, in the beginning of the book. I kind of showed, because originally the title was actually I Am Relentless, which is the name of the final chapter. And it's kind of just leveling up to that level of determination in life. Like, no one's going to tell me that I can't pursue a dream, or nobody, and we listen to other people's voices. And then oftentimes we talk ourselves out of doing whatever it is that we want to do, whether it's a career change or, learning to play the piano or whatever it is that we have this desire, but then we talk ourselves out of it and go, no, I'll suck at that, or I'm not going to be great at that, so I'm just not even going to bother. Or we were criticized by a parent or our peers and told that we're not enough, or we're not smart enough to do this, or be an attorney, or be a doctor,
or write a book,
and that stuff really gets ingrained in you, know. And I mean, even as a grown man with 2 grown children, I think that teenage voice in my mind still tries to get at me, you know, in my subconscious mind, and I think that's the same for a lot of people,
Yeah. So what I'm getting out of this is the book itself was a culmination of your journey and kind of a chronicling of the journey you've gone on with your mental health struggles over the years, and you kind of sought to compile all of that into this memoir. I think you mentioned it, called it earlier, but if you had to give like an elevator pitch for the book, what is somebody going to get out of this book if they pick up Keep Going, a relentless pursuit to find peace, passion, and purpose? What are they going to get out of it, or what do you want somebody to get out of reading this book?
Probably like a lot of people watching this that struggle with mental health, I also, am ADD. I'm a creative, so it's like if it doesn't hold my attention, I'm moving on. So the first thing that I tried to do is make each chapter very bite-sized, so it's not overwhelming. There's lots of illustrations, lots of just inspirational quotes and things like that to kind of help it go kind of quickly. The second piece that we added that I think is really cool is kind of an introspective piece, some journal entries, nothing elaborate. And yes, guys, we should journal too. We should get our emotions out. But
nothing wrong.
A lot of times, that's another stigma that oh, men don't journal, and men don't do that. But I think it's super helpful to get that. We got to get to know ourselves first on how. Truly look inside and go, why do I do that? Or why do I get angry at silly things?
And I think a thing about journaling really specifically that is a lot of times you can have thoughts about yourself or about your mental health in your head, but it's very often, I know for me at least, it doesn't really, like, even though I may know something about myself or may know something in my head, until the act of putting it down on 100%. Paper and actually expressing it and seeing it written there, kind of crystallizes it in a way that is different than just like, I know I need to do this, or I have some goal, or I have something, but putting it on paper really does, I think, as corny as it maybe sounds,
it makes it more real.
It does. It really
permanent.
does. Yeah. And so I think it's a great point that having those kind of journaling exercises is a really compelling way, an engaging way to get somebody to kind of navigate that journey and introspect on those kind of things. So
the other thought, that keeping it simple, bite-sized, and then some actionable items. Yeah. In addition to journaling, one of the early chapters is simply evaluate. Mm-hmm. It's super important that, before we start a journey on improving ourselves, we need to evaluate where we're at. We kind of need to grade ourselves on some areas, So there's some actionable items in each chapter. One of my favorite chapters is the gratitude chapter, and so I give some examples that, hey, find you, whether it's your spouse or someone you're seeing, or a friend, a sibling, whoever. Find that person and go, I'm gonna, because we did this with our own family, and it really helped us to shift focus. That every day we would just like send a couple, hey, today I'm grateful for, the sunshine, and I'm grateful for an awesome cup of coffee. It doesn't have to be some monumentous thing like, I'm so thankful for that we have, peace in America right now, which we don't. But there's a lot of unrest, and there's a lot more to be grateful for than to be ashamed or mad about our lives, And so my point is each chapter I try to bring it back to, okay, here's how you can maybe apply this principle into your daily routine, because it's all about habits and intentionality to improve our mental health.
And I think that's an important point, because we mentioned, we called it a memoir, which is true. It does chronicle your journey, but it's not, somebody picking up this book is not just going to read your life story and then be done. There, like you said, there's engaging activities. It's really using your journey to help somebody else reflect upon the one journey that they're on, because, we're all people that have a lot of similar problems and go through a lot of similar things. So I think that's a good way to put it, is it's a memoir, but it's a memoir that it's more than a memoir. Let's just say that. The title, Keep Going. I want to talk about that, and specifically where that came from, because those aren't just two random words you plucked out of nowhere. Where does the title Keep Going come from?
Well, and it's actually, it's not
We'll show a photo. We'll put a photo in.
But I don't know if the camera can pick that up, but this is my daughter's handwriting. And so in 2019, she suffered her first big breakup, and we had to put a family pet down. And then COVID screwed up, a big part of her, final years in high school. And then devastatingly, during COVID, we lost my mother-in-law, her Nana. And it's just all of those things together, I think, pushed her into a very, very low place, a place that I was, familiar with in going through those things. And as someone that has dealt with those very low periods, God, it was heartbreaking, to watch your daughter go through that and just wanting to fix it. And so we began every day putting I am sticky notes in her bathroom mirror to remind her of her value, what her worth was. Because I know that from my own personal experience that, when you are in that low place, it's so hard to turn off the negative, I am stupid, or I am ugly, or all the things that we tell ourselves. And oftentimes we do that in silence and in secret, right? So knowing that, we were trying to kind of do our best as feeling helpless and hopeless on our own way, to do that each day. And after a couple of months of her kind of being in her depression cocoon, she started to slowly come around, and she told her mom and I, she's like, I read every one of those notes. I may not have ever said anything, but I received every one of those notes. And so that was really big for us. And then shortly after, she literally put a piece of paper in front of me and a Sharpie and said, Dad, write, keep going. And I'm like, and this was when I had the book, it was collecting dust.
When it was still I Am Relentless.
Correct. And I'm like, I'm just going to sit on this. I don't believe it's good enough. But she did that. And then after I did it reluctantly, because I'm like, why am I doing this? She's like, can I get this tattooed on my arm? And at first I was like confused, but then also like, what an honor.
Yeah.
And,
oh gosh. Yeah.
And then she continued to say, Dad, anytime that I am ever feeling like that again, I want to look down and I want to hear your voice saying, you've got this, keep going. And that brought tears to my eyes, and I'm like, okay, let's absolutely. I'll go pay for the tattoo, and I'll be there.
That's what it was all a ploy to get you to pay for it.
That's right, exactly. But then fast forward 2 years, I found myself kind of on the mental health cliff of just feeling stuck.
Yeah,
and I think that there's no better way to describe that immense feeling of anxiety and the depression that's mounded by these feelings of just inadequacy, not feeling enough for anybody around me, not for, and my work team, my work suffered, my marriage was not great. I just felt lost, man.
Yeah.
And it was really the first major episode that I've had as an adult. for a number of years. I've been able to keep at bay and been able to kind of navigate with my own coping mechanisms to try to be okay. But this time it was different. It hit different. And I really felt like I was, they say once you find bottom, and I was trying to find bottom. Yeah. I was really just trying to alienate and isolate everybody from me because I thought that, okay, if this really is how it is and how I'm feeling, it's kind of like my own self-preservation was to try to alienate the people closest to me, because if I decided that if I wanted to exit this life, maybe they would hurt less.
I mean, that's not an uncommon experience for people. Yeah. And
that's really hard to speak out loud. Yeah. But when we talked about doing this, I wanted to be as open and honest and
radical
brutal.
Vulnerability.
Absolutely. Because I know that I'm not the only one that has done that. I know that I'm not the only one that has felt that. I mean, Brian, there's some statistics I put in the book. 56%, it's estimated, 56% of Americans at some point have some sort of a mental health crisis. Yeah. That could be extreme anxiety. That could be, but then only 1 out of 3 people treat the symptoms. So there's so many people that are suffering in silence. So back to the reason why is because of those people. Those statistics are alarming. This is very morbid, but I want to say it, that worldwide, almost 1 million people take their own life. 1 million people a year worldwide. And that's not okay. Now, I mean, and it's, and we are, as one of the greatest nations in the world, we still do not have proper resources, especially whether it's a big city or a small town. There's just not enough resources. Yeah. And luckily, there's some really great online resources, and I kind of give some of them a shout out. I'm not paid by any of them.
Also important to point out, you're not a medical professional. Correct. You're not a psychiatrist, I think that's an important thing to stress.
Thank you. Yeah. So I mean, these are my experiences, and one of the first lines in the book is I say, because I've read a lot of self-help books. Yeah. I have no fancy acronyms behind my name. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist, but I'm through all the pain I think that I have kind of endured and seen, it's kind of given me this very empathetic heart that I can sense when other people are going through it, and I know it's cliche, but it's so true. Be kind to people because you have no idea what battles they're facing. And we all get in our stressed out rush, and we're not nice to the convenience store clerk, or we get in our own heads because we're just rushing around trying to check our own to-do list. But we as people just need to do better and show up for people, and you have no idea what a smile or a compliment to a stranger may do for them. That may be the nicest thing that they've heard in weeks. So.
Despite the fact that you're not a medical professional, a therapist, or anything like that, I think there can really be value in, because you've gone through this, because you're, I think it's very important for people to go and seek that professional help that they need. And you like you said, you put some of those resources in here to make sure people have access to that and are aware of it. But there's also, I think, a lot of power and benefit in seeing somebody else going through the same journey you are, and the fact that, there's a commiseration there. The fact that somebody else, they're reading a book from somebody written by you that they know, especially after listening to this podcast, this person knows exactly what I'm experiencing. Your therapist may not know that. Your therapist can be very helpful in a lot of ways, obviously, but they may not have the same experience. They may not have gone through the same kind of things that you are. And so I do think a book like this, where, that is from that perspective, can be really helpful. But on that note, who is this book for? Who do you think can be most helped by this book?
Just about anybody, and I had a reader who tested it as well that said, and I had never looked at it this way, but it was a man in his 30s who wrote me, and after reading the book, and he said, my mother has struggled with bipolar and severe depression my whole life. and I've never understood. It's been frustrating, because let me tell you something. Shout out to the care, the care team and the loved ones of people that are really struggling. They are true saints. I mean, I speak about my wife and my kids, the ones closest to me that have, when you are really in the gutter and you just want to exit, I can't explain it other than it's just, it hurts to just, even communicate.
Yeah.
Those people that stand by you in that time, are incredibly wonderful people. And so you need to send that text, send that thank you. If you're thinking of someone right now, as I mentioned that, because I think it's super important. But to your point, he said, I am so glad that I read this, because I saw things in you that in my story that helped him, I think, come to grips and come to understand why she was the way she was. Again, because none of us have a roadmap to this life on navigating some of these very difficult things. We just don't. There's a lot of great books out there, but until you're going through it on your own, like, this is hard stuff. And so for him to say, look, if you've got a loved one, I recommend this book, because it helped me understand the battles of mental health too, and maybe gave him a little bit of empathy towards his mom, which, made me feel good.
That's really interesting, because that's just being very, honest about that. I've never personally dealt with any severe bouts of like anxiety, depression, any of that sort of stuff. I've been very lucky in that regard. But I have had partners and friends and all kinds of loved ones that have dealt with that, and very close loved ones that have dealt with, pretty severe depression, bipolar, that sort of thing. And I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective of being able to get a little bit of an insight into somebody who's going through that, to be actually able to read, your story about going through that could actually help somebody who's not only somebody who's going through this themselves, but the loved one of somebody going through it, because it's like a little window, because it can be very hard in those situations to get any information out of the person that you are trying to help in that instance.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you just want to be like, what is wrong? What's going on?
How do I fix this?
Yeah. How do I fix this? And honestly, the answer for a lot of that is you can't, but you just got to be there and help them and support them. Right. That's a tough lesson to learn for those of us who have been in those situations, that you can't just, as much as you just want, I want to fix it. You can't always just fix it. But like I said, I think having this as a kind of a window into that, that perspective and what that person may be going through could be really helpful. But apart from that, so is this book? I'm 35, 36. I can't remember how old I am. 36. Am I a good target demographic for this book?
Yeah, absolutely. I for sure, from a man's perspective, and I very much have written this for everybody that needs it, but I definitely have a big heart for fellow men that are struggling, and that don't, because most of us are vaults. Most of us guys were vaults. When it comes to our feelings, we just I'll sort it out myself. I'll figure it out myself, until things get so heavy that you can't sort it out yourself, and then your body and your brain just kind of shut down, and that's called depression. I think I definitely want men to dive into this if they're struggling. But really everybody across the board. Another segment of is our young adults, college age.
Like you said, you wrote it with your daughter, and part of it, with your daughter in mind, who was going through high school at the time.
And there's some startling statistics about when we send our kids off to college, and we set all of these expectations on them to make the dean's list and get active in all of these programs and sororities or fraternity, whatever, and just and they're not ready. A lot of them are not ready for that kind of stressful workload. Yeah. And then the feelings of, I'm a failure, I'm not adding up. What if I let my parents down? So parents, we need to be very cognizant.
Yeah, you nailed it.
We need to be more cognizant of, how much weight are we putting on our kids? And we do it now in Little League. Yeah. I mean, it's like you've got soccer and then t-ball and then dance practice and, and you're go. And, I think there's a lot of things that we as Americans have done that I think have attributed to the mental health crisis in our country and all around the world. Social media, technology, the addiction of just being busy, if I can say it that way. But I just think all of those things and expectation. A lot of time, the void that we feel about ourselves or the negativity that we feel. This is not me. Tony Robbins, a motivational guru, said it, but I think it's brilliant. If you look at, here's my expectations or the standards that I have set for myself, or maybe your dad or your mom or someone that's very influential in your life, it's kind of created a baseline standard for, okay, by the time that you're 35 or 36, you need to have this, and all these things figured out. And then we're living in a life where we're never reaching that. So then our own baseline is, well, I'm a failure.
Yeah.
And that's the rut. So we've got to adjust our sights and things like that. But those are the points. What Tony Robbins says is that if we're always living in that, we're always living with lack of progress. And he equates, when you're making progress, it equals temporary happiness that then leads to more contentment. And so happiness and contentment are very big, different things. But if you think about it, in the wheel of life, like if you say, okay, how's your relationship?
Great.
With Katie.
Yeah.
It's great. How's your career? How's your finances? And you start to, how in touch with nature are you? Are you planning adventures and leisure time? What do you do?
Hobbies that you enjoy.
Correct. Yeah. So there's all these things, and this is not new that that I've created, but I made an emphasis in the chapter of evaluate that it's so important that we when we're all feeling, maybe it's not depression, maybe it's just like life's okay.
Yeah.
It's just blah.
Malaise.
Correct. but so even though the heavy emphasis on this book and the target audience is around mental health, it's also around just becoming the best version of you that you can be. And life is very short, and I just think, again, fear, insecurity, self-doubt, all those things push our dreams and our wants and our cans or shoulda, coulda, woulda situations, and we talk ourselves out of having the best life that we desire, because somewhere in our mind we tell ourselves that we don't deserve it. Yeah. And that is the negative loop that my hope is that, is through pieces of the book and other things that we're putting together with this project, that it will help people to see, number one, their infinite value. Every human being is beautiful and precious and has great opportunity to make a big impact on this world. And even though that's cliche, I just believe, every fingerprint on every human being on this planet is unique and different. Yeah. And so I think, call me the blue sky guy that is the eternal optimist. But when I think about the human existence, I think, we have such a short piece here on Earth. And for those that are struggling with a lot of these things that we're talking about, which we haven't even talked about, addiction, when you have mental health, a lot of times addiction follows very closely, together. I was a massive drinker, drank way too much to try to just numb the feelings that I had, but through that process, it actually gave me some level of empathy to those addicts out there that they don't know how to fix what's broken in their brain. Yeah. And so all they're looking for is just a temporary relief. And so instead of just casting away people that have a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction or a gambling, whatever their vice is, we've got to start looking at the root cause. And the root cause for this next generation is trying to arm this next generation with the tools and the coping mechanisms and the education. I think it's got to start there, both at home and in our school system. It would be my hope.
Yeah. So I think you kind of touched on there that it's great for everybody. But one of the points that I think you hit that was interesting that I hadn't thought about that I think could be really compelling is maybe for parents. You talked about sending their kids away to school. and maybe the parent isn't dealing with a mental health struggle or whatever, but reading something like Keep Going, reading your book, seeing your story, and I think being able to, I think it may put parents more on alert to be vigilant, of the mental health in their child.
Yes.
In a way that, because again, seeing what you've gone through and kind of what the signs were for you, and when you started pulling away from people, what that looked like, what that felt like, what was going on in your head during those moments and that sort of thing, and then how you worked through it. I think, so even if it was just something that jumped in my head, is like, for a parent, that could be immensely valuable.
Resource,
that's awesome. My next question is a different one. I want to know if there's anything while you were writing Keep Going that was really difficult, that you had to confront, that was a moment that, or a chapter, a part of it, a thing you were recollecting in your past, something like that, or a realization that you had about yourself that was difficult. I want to hear about it.
Oh boy. Thanks, Oprah. No,
that's what we're doing here, Jason.
No, it's a really good question. I can think of two moments as I was writing that tears began to fill into my eyes, because I really hadn't thought about articulating what I felt.
Yeah.
And so part of that was in the chapter that kind of kicks the book off, called The Dark Place. When I was younger, I never referred to my low times as I'm depressed or whatever, I just would tell my friends, or, whatever, I'm just kind of in a dark place, working through it, and brushing it off, and as not that serious.
Yeah.
But, in the Dark Place chapter, I recollected the day that my dad left my mom and I. And I'm an only child. I was 13. My dad, was my hero, like a lot of young men. It's like, I remember writing a paper, in elementary school or somewhere in there, maybe middle school, when the teacher said, write about a hero.
Yeah.
And I chose my dad because, he was kind of this big life of the party, and everybody just loved him, and he was a musician. And like, I was like, man, I want to be like that when I grow up,
Yeah.
And so they were young parents, in retrospect, he would tell you he made a lot of mistakes. But today, we have reconciled, and, I think it's important. My story is not the worst you're going to hear. And so for you listening, and I say this in the book, because a lot of times I would think, but what about, the kid that lost his parents?
Right. You get that imposter syndrome of like, well, my issues aren't that bad. Who am I to do this?
Yeah. And so that was a lot in my head. And so I want the viewers or listeners to hear my heart, that, as a 13-year-old, whether your crush at school tells you you're ugly, or your house burns down, or, those are all very different situations, but they're equally somewhat as traumatic.
They can be
to that individual.
In any individual moment. Yeah. Those moments, the fact that somewhere else something horrible is happening to another person does not make the fact that you're going through something terrible any better for you, or any easier for you.
Right. And so to that point, just as a quick side note, because I want to finish my original thought.
Yeah.
But as a side note, your story and your pain is yours and only yours. And so don't ever allow anybody else to minimize your feelings, and minimize where you're at or how hard this is. And that's something, and to the loved ones that are supporting people, please stop saying, get up, get over it.
Yes.
Please stop saying, what can I do? Or, can I, how do we fix this? Let's go for a walk. Let's do this. My advice to loved ones, because I've had multiple conversations with my wife and my kids over the last several years about this, because my wife is also a fixer.
Yes.
And I finally said, when you can see it in my eyes, when you can see it in my demeanor, because we show it, physically a lot, just be there, be present, hold the person, hug them, let them know that you're there, but most likely they don't want to talk. They don't have the energy to communicate what's going on. And a lot of times what's frustrating is they don't know what caused it this time. There's not this one thing and but we want to figure that out.
Yes.
So it's very hard to navigate, but yeah, sorry, that was a little.
No, you're good. But back to your father, the story about your father.
So I recalled, the day that literally he packed up his stuff and sat down with me and gave me some heirlooms that had been passed down to him. It was kind of like, it felt like a death in the family. Like I was literally saying goodbye to my dad for the last time.
Feels like a very unique experience. Maybe it's not, but I feel like for a lot of people that would go through something similar, that moment of like finality, like that has to be incredibly, I don't know, hard.
It was very shocking.
Yeah.
I was.
You said you were 13?
Yeah. It was very difficult for me to process, but I remember watching him pack up his vehicle and pull out of the driveway, knowing deep down in myself that it was going to be a long time that I would see him again. And then my mom and I just sat in the kitchen and just cried together and held each other. And he moved away, and things were rough for quite a while. And then I uprooted and moved to a new school. And so now not only am I dealing with, didn't know the words at the time, but feelings of abandonment and feelings of like my hero is, not who I thought he was.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to make you feel like you did something wrong.
Right.
So
it's all that messed up. And then you throw me into a brand new school district where I didn't know a soul. And immediately from day one, I don't know if it was my defeated posture or what, but I was bullied, right out of the gate, just for looking different or whatever, but and so then I very quickly did not have a safe place.
Yeah.
Because I did not want, and this hurts my mom when she read this, but I wanted to protect her from any more pain and any more hurt. So I would never tell her that I was being bullied at school or that I didn't want to go to school or just, because I was protecting her.
Yeah.
So which is scary because, again, talking to parents, it's so important that they have a vehicle to get it out. And so to your point earlier, we've got to find those warning signs, get to them, make sure that they feel like they have a safe place at home to talk about what they're doing, what they're feeling, what's happening at school when you're not around as a parent. When I was 14, I ended up having a major meltdown at school, and I could feel myself like this pain of all of the emotions that I'd been feeling. I think I had buried so deep, but something triggered me with some mean slur that I was called in the boys' locker room or something. And it was just that final straw that sent me over the edge. And I busted through the counselor's door. And as soon as I shut the door, I just started bawling. I mean, just sobbing, and I could not get the words out. And she just sat there and was consoling me. And finally, I got the words out. I don't want to live anymore. And that changed the trajectory because I'd never spoken that out loud at 14 years old to say that. I ended up going on lockdown at a behavioral place. I was the youngest person there. It was terrifying, but I needed it, and it was also, I think, a wake up call for my mom and dad.
Yeah.
And so things slowly started to improve from there. But recalling some of those things and recalling some of the emotion and the hurt and the anguish from some of those stories did make me relive them a little bit.
It reopens that wound. It definitely brings it right back in a way that is, it's tough to when you go back and you re-examine those moments from your life. And if I don't have any experiences like that, but thinking back to anytime you kind of have to kind of dig back, and I've never written a book like this, but I imagine that in order to really express that, you really have to dig into like what your mental state was and what you were going through, and really put yourself back in that moment, in order to translate it onto the page and make it real, and make it real for your reader. Was there while you were writing the book, you said you've read your share of self-help books over the years. Was there an author or another book specifically that kind of inspired you, that you feel like was kind of responsible for maybe spurring you to write this book? Was there something that you identified with? Because honestly, if nothing else, just as another resource to our listeners and our viewers, something that helped you and that kind of led to keep going.
Well, I mean, so I could probably show you dozens of self-help books that I have bought through the years. Some of them I've never read. Some of them, I kind of skimmed, but there have been a few that I really kind of locked arms with. The precipice or the beginning of me wanting to write a book actually was in 2010 or 2009, right in that range. Yeah. My wife gave me a journal, and in the first, because I was trying then to make better morning habits. Yeah. Get up a half hour extra early, take a walk, do things that are kind of setting your mind right. And so she got me this journal, and I still have it somewhere. But there's the very first introspective question is, dare to unpack the dreams that you have buried long ago. And, again, and there's a common theme as we've been talking. I've kind of brought up dreams and how self-doubt and insecurity are really dream crushers, oftentimes, because we measure our worth to how we think, imposter syndrome and all those different things. And so I wrote that day, I want to write a book that at the time it wasn't, in my mind, it wasn't as centered just around mental health, but it was really just a similar vibe of, I wanted to inspire young people. I've always had a passion. When I talk about my 13-year-old self, my 14-year-old self, and navigating that stuff, that is it's such a vulnerable age. There's a reason why suicide rates among our youth are so high. And it's because they feel like today's problem is forever.
Yes.
Or this breakup is going to feel like it does right now forever. And so they just don't have that emotional maturity yet. And that's why from school professionals to parents, we all have to be able to unite, educate all of ourselves a little bit more. And if I can be just a small part of that education, or at least making people think about mental health a little differently, because it's not about just psychosis and all that stuff. Mental health is health. Yeah. And we've all had bad days. We've all had bad days that have turned into bad weeks. And being able to navigate all of that, I think, is super important. There is no shame in seeking help. There's no shame in talk therapy. There's no shame in medication, if that is your thing. But there's lots of things that you can do that will help your mental health. Getting outside, getting sun, planting your feet in a creek bed, as an adult. Adults, we forget how to play. Think about the things that you were passionate about or that you loved when you were kids. Do that again, whether that's coloring or art or video games that remind you of your childhood. Tap into nostalgia. There's exercise. Get your heart beating, and that releases all the happy, endorphins that we all need, and most of us have a shortage of these days because we don't do those things. But gratitude, positive affirmations, goal setting. I'm just rattling off a bunch of things here that I have found that I've sprinkled throughout the book, but also things that I want to help this next young generation to do more of, so that they can truly become the best version of themselves.
And it sounds like, from what you're saying, that it was specifically that journaling exercise that kind of you said you read that. You read that journaling exercise and you wrote down, I want to write a book. And then boom, here we are, 14 years later, there's a book.
Right.
So you had told us this story shortly after finishing the book, and we were kind of ramping up, talking about the book, and you kind of just had a chance encounter with somebody that was going through something. Can you share that story with, because I would love to hear it again, but I also think it could be really helpful to our listeners.
It goes back to what I said earlier about, be kind to people, because we don't know what they're going through. And so I have been, the last thing I ever want to be with this book is a hypocrite. Yeah. And so what I put in there is really urging and challenging people to step outside their box a little bit. Notice that person that seems off or sad, even if they're a stranger, and just, we don't have to make it weird. Trust me, I'm really good at that. Just ask my kids. But at this particular time, I was at just a small little local retail store. We'd just finished the book, and then we actually built a box, which we'll probably elaborate on a little later.
Talk about it,
But it's called the Keep Going box, and it's just full of just beautiful inspiration, encouragement, and all kinds of good stuff. And it's just packed full of lots of keep going stuff that also is very applicable for your everyday life, that helps set these habits in motion, et cetera. But anyway, I just happened to have my prototype box in the back of my truck at the time. I was running in and went and was shopping. And as I was in line, normally, I'm very impatient at stores. Okay, you might get that, but it's like if the line's too long, I will normally just leave, because I'm like, I don't need it that bad. Anyway, this day I was just chilling, and I locked eyes with the girl that was checking people out, and I could just see, man, she just looked like she was going through something. Yeah. And the closer I got, I could see, I could tell that she had been crying. And then I heard her tell a coworker, it was the last day of school, high school, and she just got dumped, and she just was a mess. Yeah. And the moment God got up there, I was sitting there thinking, okay, she's just a little bit younger than my daughter. I don't want to be weird, but I want to extend kindness to her and just say, I overheard, and I can see it on your face. And I just wanted to say, things are going to be okay. I know you don't know me, but and I gave her a compliment. My mom always said, if you think a compliment, give it, because they may not ever receive that. And so I said, and this young girl, again, close to my daughter's age, beautiful blue eyes, and just, you could tell, just a sweet, sweet girl. And so I reached out and I said, as someone that's old enough to be your dad, just know that I'm proud of you. I think you're beautiful, and I know this hurts, but it will pass. And then I showed her my tattoo. Yeah. And
it's a great way to get kick off a conversation with somebody. Going. Yeah.
And so, I stalled the line, and I stopped.
Everybody behind you became the person.
I know. They were all so mad at me, but luckily they were really sweet. And I said, I'm sorry, we're having a brief moment.
We're having a moment here.
We're having a moment. Let this play out. Yeah. Anyway, she came from around, hugged me like she was my long lost daughter, and
Clearly, she needed that in that moment. You could tell, yeah.
And so I went back. So I went out to the truck, and I saw that Keep Going box, and I'm like, we don't even have this.
What better time though?
And so I went back in there and I gave it to her, and she just started crying. She's like, no, nobody ever does this, you know? And, you know, the next day she had me sign her book, and I, again, don't make fun of me, Brian. But,
well, I would never.
But I wrote in the book, you know, an encouraging message. But then I put my phone number, and I just said,
which we can guarantee will be in every single
right. No. But I told her name was Emma. I did get her permission to use her name, but I told Emma, I said, because when I hugged her, she said, sorry, this is a side note.
No, you're good.
She said, my dad's not in the picture, so I needed this even more.
Yeah.
Because because she, and I know what that's like.
Yeah, I would say if anybody knows what that's like, you've been there.
To have, my dad and I have reconciled, and he's a wonderful man, and things are good, but that's not
that period
always
in your life, there was that,
And so, man, it ripped my heartstrings out. And the next day, she texted me a wonderful message and said, I'm already using everything. I'm through the first chapter. I'm starting the journal. I've hung my vision board up to roadmap her life. And she was going to the gym with her Keep Going water bottle. I'm like,
if ever you needed a proof of
yes, it was
a proof of concept.
Look, I've got goosebumps because there's something so validating, you know, when you have kind of a passion project here and a stranger.
Oh yeah.
It just, it was just a beautiful moment to exchange. And so, my hope is that I know that there is thousands, tens of thousands of Emmas out there.
I don't think you bumped into the only one in America.
Correct. And so if your name's Emma, no,
yeah,
but yeah, so it did. It was super validating. That and validation squashes that negative talk.
Yeah.
And so it feels so good. I had somebody else that's actually going through a divorce right now. And I gave her a book, and she sent me as she was reading it with her coffee, she sent me something that moved her, that touched her. And again, it's those little things as an author, as a creator of a vulnerable piece like this. I'd be lying if I didn't say it's those kind of comments or those types of things that just make me feel like all of this was worth it.
Oh yeah, how could you?
All worth it.
I mean, that's one of those things where that kind of experience for me, if I were doing something like this, I'd be like, well, I'm good.
Yeah,
that's it. Just that one. That's all. I mean, obviously you want to help a bunch more people, but
Correct.
That is. I got that one in the win column. I'm like, all right, we're good. That's the validation I needed in the, that this is something important and worthwhile and that can actually help people. But so speaking of the box, let's talk a little bit about the Keep Going box. Now that we've kind of gone through the story and what the book means and what it's about. What is the Keep Going box?
So it was super important to me. Again, if you go to Barnes and Noble or any of the big box stores or Amazon and look for similar books in this genre, there's millions, millions of different things, and lots of good stuff. But I would say what I feel is lacking out there, with all the subscription boxes out there, and you can go and get these cool swag boxes with, different things. We have not found, my team and I have not found anything that is quite like what we're putting together, where it's I keep using the word intentional and mindfulness because I think those two words are really good at explaining, when you set your intent to overcome, when your intention is, I'm going to become the best version of myself by, fixing some of my bad habits and replacing them with better ones. And, that's why, at the beginning of the year, we set all these new things that we want to accomplish as far as goals. I'm going to exercise more, or I'm going to lose a few pounds, or I'm going to do this, that. You have to be intentional if you're going to achieve goals, period. And so really this book about is Keep Going is in the box is really all about reinforcing the intentionality with actionable items and actionable steps. And then having the resources and the things that are in the box as reminders. So the I am sticky notes. It may sound cliche, it may sound goofy, but if you again, the power of writing something down, even if you don't believe it, I can say, you know what, I am brilliant.
Yes.
Now, that's a very subjective term, but I want to believe myself as being brilliant enough to pursue whatever it is I want to. And I think we all want that, but we normally go, oh, that's stupid. I'm stupid. Or we replace the I am with something negative. So the I am sticky notes are something you can do or a loved one can do for you, as we did for my daughter. Obviously, the journal has coloring pages in it. So if you're just feeling like, I don't want to do words today, I'm just going to color something.
There you go. Perfect.
So it gauges adult play. And then, the water bottle, the vision board. The vision board is something that, put it where you're going to look at it every morning, every night before you go to bed. Because the law of attraction, I think, is a real thing. You hyper focus on your goals, and you're intentional about those. You will find a way to get there. The same way that I had some crazy ideas and some crazy dreams, as maybe some other people may say, to start a marketing business or to write a book or, to do whatever it is that we decide to do. A lot of people are like, that's nuts. That's crazy. But the more intentional you are, the more those things become reality.
So the box is full of items that complement the book and go with the book, because the book is also part of the box. And like you said, you've talked about the vision board and all that stuff, but really it's kind of your goal with creating the box was to create this one-stop shop kind of where you can get it for yourself, or if you want to get it for somebody else, like we talked about earlier with parents. If you have a kid off in college, this is a great opportunity to get this box. It gets customized, we put a little note in it, we send it off right to them, and they get this box with everything in it, kind of similar to how Emma, we talked about kind of just one of those moments that I think if somebody were to get that without expecting it could really affect them. Even if they didn't use a single thing in the box, just knowing that somebody thought about them in that way and thought to send them something like that, I think can mean a lot. But
that's really the hope, Brian, is I think everybody, I think at some point or another has had somebody that they have felt like, I don't know what to do for this person. I care very deeply about them. I know that they're going through it. Or going through their own dark place, whatever that looks like for them. What can I do? And so I believe, and I'm super pumped that, this is kind of like the ultimate gift of encouragement that's saying a few things. I've got your back as the sender. I believe in you. And then on the side of the box, again, the affirmation theme, on one side, it says, I am worthy. And on the back, it says, I am unstoppable. And then on the other side, it says, I am enough. These are all things that we don't tell ourselves enough. When we are in that negative loop, we actually say the contrary. And so it's, and then we handwrite the receiver's name, whoever you're gifting the box to. Whether you're giving it to yourself or giving it to a loved one or someone you care about. It is just that extra level of personalization that it's not like you can run out to Walmart or a big box store and get a gift like this. It's very personal and again, saying you got this. I have heard also, and this excites me, that a mom is wanting to buy a box for all of her kids and then wanting to have a vision board party at their house.
That's fun.
And talk about their goals and and make that kind of a family thing, and like whether that you do this with your best friend or whatever, or your spouse or your significant other. I think, there are tools in the box that I think will help everybody just have conversations about what makes you feel, um, most loved.
Yeah.
Or when's the last time that you felt insignificant, or when you felt those feelings of like, I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And then you ask those questions and create some meaningful conversations so that it just strengthens relationships too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm giving anything away here saying that we got a chance to test run your vision board recently at a work function. And I am not a person who normally engages with those kind of things. It's not really my style of thing, but I will say this. I actually found filling out the vision board. We all went and got in our own little, corner for 10, 15 minutes and kind of really went through the vision board, which was about your dreams, what goals do you have and all that sort of stuff. And it was actually really, I don't know, like I said, I'm not normally one for that kind of exercise, but it really is something when you're sitting forced to really think about it and like write that stuff down. It does, even if you never touch that vision board ever again, even just having thought about it that one time and written down, like, I want to do this, I want to go to this place, I have this career goal. It even just that single time really kind of forces you to grapple with what it is that you want in your life in a way that is way more, that forces you to address it in a way that just kind of thinking about it passively doesn't, I guess is my point. So anyways, I just thought it was,
There's too many of us that I think go through life on autopilot, or use whatever analogy or illustration. You're on autopilot. You're not really participating on the direction of where you're just take me wherever.
Yeah.
And we just go with the flow. Not saying that there's anything wrong with that. But, and it's kind of like always sitting in the bleachers, but wanting to be in the game.
Yeah.
But never exerting the energy to try out for the team in the first place. But just wishing. And so it's, I think that life, again, is what we make it. Your life is going to be, I often explain that life is like a book. It's full of chapters. Some are good, some are bad, some are funny, some are highly embarrassing. And then some you never want to read again because they're too painful. But as long as you have air in your lungs, there is always time to write that next chapter. There's always time to improve upon the chapter before. And there's always time, wait, this is cliche and super cheese.
Hit me with it.
But we all deserve to write our own happy ending, right?
Very good.
That's a goofy, cheesy dad thing for me to say, but I do. I believe that. I had a little daughter that I would dress up and dance around as she pretended to be Cinderella. And when we teach our kids to dream about the impossible, to dream about the beauty, that we see in cartoon characters and different things like that. And then we become cynical adults where, man, just life smacks you around and you become just bitter about it all. And so my hope is that readers or people that order the Keep Going box, not only do they begin to see the infinite beauty that is inside of them, but that their dreams are worth pursuing, and that their happy ending is there, and they are in charge of their life to really write that beautiful chapter. That's really my hope, as well as just creating more conversations around this topic, whether it's local, state, community type people, to start taking notice and figuring out how do we better equip both our students in secondary education as well as higher education, and just community outreach and support. I think we need to do better, just as human beings, as Americans, on protecting life. When the pandemic during COVID came to hit us, nobody was ready for it. and most of us have never really lived through a pandemic. I made a comparison that the COVID-19 pandemic, was such a major disruptor in our world, and it's all we talked about for 4 years, right? I gave you all those staggering statistics, earlier. 56% of Americans are struggling in some form or fashion with mental health. So many lives lost. We're not giving care to our veterans who come back with massive trauma and PTSD and just cannot cope. They feel like a burden to their families, and so they choose to leave this world because they think everybody will be better off. Same with our LGBTQ plus, adults. They take their lives at a much higher rate than straight folks. I mean, and so there's lots of different segments and lots of different people in the world that are, just not getting the care that they deserve.
Yeah.
And they're not getting, and in my opinion, we're not putting a spotlight on it because it's not pretty to talk about.
Yeah, it's not fun.
But neither is cancer.
No, yes.
And neither is heart disease.
Yeah.
But we make, our healthcare systems make a lot of money figuring out how to, get patients in their beds.
Yeah.
But we can't solve a mental health crisis in our country. And we're not going to win the fight until more people stand up and talk about it, and we make it a priority, not only in our homes, but in our schools. And so I know that sounded like a political speech.
No.
And it's not at all.
No, yes, I think it's very much a, regardless of any sort of political anything, I think it's something we could all agree with, that there is a need to discuss everybody's mental health more, because it's something, like you said, almost everybody, either you're dealing with it or somebody you love very dearly is dealing with it. And so it's pretty much touches every single person in some way. And so continuing that conversation, I think, is super important. And hopefully, the book will help do that. Before we wrap up here, though, I wanted to see if there was something, if somebody was watching this right now, if they stumbled across, I don't know how, but if they stumbled across this and they're in a very low place, or, if they're, maybe they are at a place where you felt like you were when you were 14, where they don't want to be here anymore. What would you tell somebody in that moment? If you could give a message to somebody who's in that low place, what would you say?
First of all, I'm glad you've found us. First words I want you to know, if you're watching this and you're feeling that way, is you are not alone. And there is a better day. Just wait till tomorrow. There's a reason why the movement of the semicolon, became a very popular design symbol for keep going, because it's, a period represents the finality of a story, where the semicolon is simply a pause. And so I would implore you to pause, breathe, but then fight. And I know how hard it is, as someone that has been in the depths of a very low place, when you just feel like you have nothing in you to fight. But I implore you to fight. And if you can't fight on your own, you find that person and say, I need help. There are resources, lots of online resources. You can find those on our website as well. And reach out, join our community. Join our community of other people. It goes back to what we were talking about, validation. Sometimes it feels good just to know I'm not the only one that feels this way. I'm not the only one that's going through something like this. And that gives you maybe just a little bit of hope and courage to make it another day. But lastly, I just want to say, in the book, I repeatedly sign different chapters as kind of like a letter to the reader. And remember the movie Avatar? I know you do, as a big movie buff. In the Avatar world, they never use the words "I love you."
Oh.
But instead, you remember
it's been a while, but yes,
okay,
I did see it several times.
The human man, as he
yes,
goes,
Jake Sully.
Yes, as he goes into, and he falls in love.
Yes,
with I can't remember the character's name.
I don't remember the character's name, but yeah.
And she taught him that they looked very deeply into one another's eyes and just said, "I see you." And the power of those words are, because love you is so fleeting. Some of us, don't get me wrong, I love you, but
yes.
But I feel like sometimes we watered that down. Okay, love you, see you, love you, bye.
Right. It becomes a thing you just say out of habit. That correct. Is just, yeah, I love you, bye. Yeah, that sort of thing.
And trust me, I still want the people around me to tell me that
yes.
they love me.
Yes.
But sometimes in deep moments, and this is what I think was super powerful to watch in that movie, is that when she explained, when they're deeply looking at one another's eyes, they're literally looking at each other's souls. And when they say, "I see you," I see your imperfections and I see your perfections. I see your faults. I see your wins. I see your victories, but I also see your failures. Mm-hmm. And I like what I see. I see you.
Yeah.
And so, and I know that's kind of deep or whatever, but I thought that was so beautiful. And so, both in the beginning chapter and the final chapter, I sign the pages. "I see you, Jason," because for some people that are going to read this book or watch this podcast, maybe they've never felt seen. And I mean that way more than our visible eyes.
Yes.
But they've not felt significant. They've not felt valued. They've not felt like their life mattered. And so, that is I can feel myself getting emotional. That is truly my heart, is to try to make sure that everybody, that whether you just join us on social media or you listen to our podcast or you get a box or you get a book or whatever, that I just want anybody that is touched by the Keep Going project, that they leave here better than they came and they feel seen. That's truly my heart behind the whole project.
Fantastic. And I think I'll say this, I don't know, you do a very good job of making people feel seen, because that is something that I have always felt from the moment I met you, that there's a level of genuine caring that you are able to hold for other people that I don't think is super common. Even people that you've just met and that you barely know, that I don't think is super common. I know for myself, I don't quite get to that level as quickly as you do. And so it's something that I am deeply envious of, that you have that ability. But that I also think is something that makes you a perfect person for this kind of project, because you are able to see people and see the best in them and see the worst in them, but acknowledge it and take it all as part of who they are. So.
Thanks so much, Brian. That means a lot.
What's the website? Where can people Keep Going?
JustKeepGoing.org.
There you go. JustKeepGoing.org.
So here's how to remember it. I don't know why, but when we found that domain, when we were first starting this, it reminded me of Just Keep Swimming, from Dory and Finding Nemo, which is kind of,
that's great.
Hey, just keep swimming, just keep going.
That is kind of the message of that movie to some extent, or at least,
don't give up.
Yeah, absolutely. So and that website has a little bit more about you, where you can purchase the box, the book. We have all the stuff separately. So if you just want to get the book or just get the vision board, you can do that. But also just kind of start the journey, the Keep Going journey. It's a great the portal to do all that. Well, thank you, Jason, for sitting down and I say that thank you like this isn't your podcast, but thank you for allowing me to come and ask you all these questions about Keep Going. It's something that I've been really looking forward to, because I always love having conversations with you, and I've been very much looking forward to hearing you express yourself about this thing that is clearly very important to you.
Well, thank you for being a wonderful host and putting me at ease. You did. You made this a lot more comfortable and I just a conversation. And,
yes, absolutely.
So so thank you.
Fantastic. Well, that's going to do it for this episode, though. We're going to wrap up. Will be joining us for another episode. I won't be here, but you will be. We're actually going to hear from your daughter, Hannah, is
My
going to
daughter,
join you.
Hannah.
Yes.
I'm super excited, and she is very much like me, but she normally hates cameras.
Yeah.
But because this project means a lot to her as well, she's like, I will be a big girl.
Suck it up and do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, I'm anxious to interview her, and
I think
and
that'll
I'm sure
be
she'll interview me too.
Yeah.
But
that'll
I
be
think
a
it'll
lot of
be good.
fun. Yeah,
So,
I think that'll be great. So yeah, that'll be the next episode. Jason v. Hannah battle. But yes, so make sure you come back, like, subscribe wherever you're listening to or enjoying this content, and we'll see you next time on Keep Going.